and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Благодарю вас.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix. Thank him for his briefing. I'd like to say that we do value your opinion. And I also wanted to thank Ms. Sarah Blackmore for her briefing, for the very emotional testimony she's brought to bear. Of course, peacekeeping is a fundamental pillar of the UN, and peacekeeping operations are an irreplaceable element of maintaining international peace and security through conflict settlement. And that is why, at the core of the attention of the member states and the UN Secretary, what we have is the issues of optimizing our peacekeeping missions, improving their performance, and improving the safety of the blue helmets. We appreciate the initiatives and personal efforts undertaken by the Secretary General, which he is doing here, and this includes the proposed Declaration of Shared Commitments. Many provisions of this document is something that warrants our support. We did endorse it, but with reservations. And this is because we do not agree with equating monitoring human rights and the issue of the protection of civilians, because the latter could imply that the peacekeepers would use force. Nonetheless, what is important is to make sure that peacekeeping performance is something that is being paid very close attention to, and this means that ultimately the member states, together with the C-34 committee, will be able to find a consensus solution here. And one of the issues that needs to be resolved is the issue of improving the performance of peacekeepers and the civilian personnel and shoring up the discipline. We are convinced that what is needed here is a comprehensive approach based on the interaction between the Security Council, the contingent supplying countries, host countries, and the UN Secretariat. What is important is to have a constructive and open dialogue, but also making sure that each link of the chain is implementing their commitments in good faith. Madam President, if we're talking about improving the performance of the peacekeeping efforts as a whole, of course, what could help us here is only if we have very clear mandates with missions with emphasis on the political settlement. In the course of strategic reviews of missions, what we need to do is clean up the mandates and make sure that we remove from them the peripheral high human rights, humanitarian, and social goals, because all of these are goals for the host country. Of course, the effectiveness of the blue helmets depends directly on how well and transparent the UN Secretariat works. The training manuals, the concepts, and the guiding principles have to be fully in line with the parameters determined by the Special Committee on Peacekeeping Operations, have to be clear and very easy to implement. Unfortunately, here not everything is smooth. And a very glaring example of neglect shown towards a decision passed by member states is the issue of information collection and analysis, or the so-called intelligence and peacekeeping. The first version of the concept document, framework document on this, was at variance with the decisions by member states. The second updated version, it is our understanding, the plan here is to implement this without having the necessary examination and approval by C-34. We obviously cannot share such an approach when it comes especially to such a sensitive issue. Madam President, as regards the performance benchmarks, well, they have to include the assessment of work of all of the components of peacekeeping operations, including the UN Secretariat in New York. And the methodology for that has to be based on very clear control indicators. We also need to include from there the very possibility of having a biased and subjective approach when determining that the contingent is not effective. I cannot overlook another hot issue here. Unfortunately, the statistics we have on sexual crimes to date does not gives a reason to be optimistic. This is something that warrants very close attention, and we heard today a very emotional testimony on that from Ms. Blakemore. But the idea of collective responsibility of entire contingents for individual crimes is something that gives rise to questions, even when those crimes are unforgivable. But here we're not talking about just the crimes that the blue helmets are being accused of. The policy of zero tolerance should also be applied to non-UN peacekeepers, as well as the representatives on non-government organizations which are accredited with the UN. Generally, our view is that the parameters for the UN peacekeeping reforms should be determined within the intergovernmental format. This is what is stated in the Special Committee on Peacekeeping reports, and these reports are yearly approved by the General Assembly by consensus. And the implementation of these initiatives also has to be carried out while fully taking into account the assessments and concerns of member states. At the very core of the reform, of course, is the absolute abidance by the UN Charter and the basic principles of peacekeeping, the consent of the sides, impartiality, non-use of force except for cases of self-defense and mandate protection. Their flexible interpretation, even when the most noble pretexts are used, is unacceptable. These basic principles is something that need to guide all of the aspects of the mission, including the protection of the civilians, where this is included in the mandate. The peacekeepers are not to be able to go ahead waving guns and become a fighting party to the conflict. Even more out of the question is using force against the host state, because they bear the primary responsibility for the people's safety. We have all the more questions and concerns having to do with the issue of transforming peacekeeping into a robust instrument or using the blue helmets in offensive or counter-terrorist operations. Such an approach will make them into a target. Please note that the rising death toll among the peacekeepers recently has been happening as we increase and make more robust the mandates of individual missions. At the same time, we fully share the concern of needing to improve the safety of peacekeepers, and this could be done by improving their equipment and materiel and improving their professional training. Madam President, in conclusion, I would like to comment upon the U.S. proposal on the Security Council draft document on peacekeeping performance. As we discuss it, of course, we're going to be guided by the approaches that I've just described. But given the general nature of the issue, we think it's important to make sure that whatever decisions there are, they have to be fully supported, not just by the Council members, but also by the troop contributing countries. And the best platform for that is a Special Committee on Peacekeeping. This is a platform which provides the best format for such kind of a trilateral cooperation. We do not think that the Council should try and bypass C-34 and get involved in micromanagement, even though it's, of course, will be important to send a political signal stating that the performance improvement of peacekeeping is a very important issue. And this could be done in a separate statement from the President. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation.